Marina's fingers trembled as she adjusted the emerald silk scarf around her neck for what must have been the 100th time that evening. The fabric felt like it was suffocating her, but she couldn't take it off. She wouldn't. "Stop fidgeting," her sister Kara hissed beside her, champagne flute poised elegantly at her lips. "You're drawing attention to yourself." Marina dropped her hand immediately, forcing herself to keep still, despite every instinct screaming at her to run from this glittering ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and the dangerous men in expensive suits who filled it. She didn't belong here. She was a middle school art teacher from Connecticut, for God's sake. The most thrilling thing in her life was usually deciding which coffee to order at the cafe near her apartment. But Kara had begged, pleaded actually, with tears in her eyes that Marina had never seen before. "I need you there as my buffer. Preston's introducing me to his business associates, and I can't do it alone. Please, Marina. Just this once." Marina should have known better, should have recognized the desperation in her younger sister's voice for what it was. Fear. But she'd been so focused on her own problems, her own pain, that she'd agreed without asking the right questions. Now she stood in the ballroom of the Rothmore Hotel, surrounded by men whose eyes were too calculating, too cold, watching women draped in jewels that probably cost more than Marina's annual salary. The air itself felt weighted with secrets and unspoken threats. "I need to use the restroom," Marina whispered. Kara's perfectly manicured nails dug into her wrist. "Don't leave me." "I'll be 5 minutes. Well. The voice came from behind them, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. "Preston, you didn't mention your fiancé had such a beautiful sister." Marina turned and felt the air leave her lungs. The man standing before her was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Roman coin, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Pale gray, almost silver, and utterly merciless. He wore his tuxedo like armor, and when he smiled, it didn't reach those cold eyes. "Mr. Volkov," Preston stammered, appearing at Kara's side with a sheen of sweat on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. "This is Marina, Kara's sister. Marina, this is Alexei Volkov." Marina had heard that name before. Whispered in news reports that never quite said what he did, only hinted at connections to shipping companies, real estate developments, and always the word alleged before any actual crimes. She extended her hand because that's what polite people did, and Marina had been raised to be polite even when her heart was hammering against her ribs. His hand enveloped hers, warm and strong, and he held it a beat too long. His thumb brushed across her knuckles in a gesture that might have seemed casual if not for the intensity of his gaze. "A pleasure," he said, and Marina felt the words slide down her spine like ice water. She pulled her hand back and immediately reached for her scarf, adjusting it higher on her neck. The motion was automatic, protective, and she didn't realize she'd done it until she saw his eyes narrow slightly, tracking the movement. "Are you cold, Marina?" The way he said her name, with a slight emphasis on each syllable, made it sound like an intimacy. "I'm fine, thank you." "The scarf," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "It's beautiful. Hermes?" I don't know. It was a gift." That was a lie. She'd bought it herself 3 weeks ago, the day after she'd finally left Richard. The day after the last time he'd... "Marina has excellent taste," Kara cut in, her voice pitched too high, too bright. "She's always been the artistic one in the family." Alexei's attention shifted to Kara for a moment, and Marina saw something flicker across his face. Assessment. Calculation. Then his gaze returned to Marina, and she felt pinned like a butterfly in a collector's case. "I'd very much like to speak with you later this evening, Marina." "Perhaps you'd join me for a drink on the terrace?" It wasn't really a question, despite the phrasing. Before Marina could formulate a polite refusal, Preston jumped in with an eagerness that made her stomach turn. "That would be wonderful, Mr. Volkov. I'm sure Marina would be honored. I'm perfectly capable of speaking for myself, Marina said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. Years of dealing with Richard had taught her to be meek, to apologize, to fold herself smaller and smaller. But standing here, facing this dangerous man who somehow felt less threatening than the monster she'd left behind, something in her snapped. And I appreciate the invitation, but I'm not feeling well. I think I'll be leaving soon. Kara made a small, strangled sound. Preston's face went white, but Alexei smiled, and this time it almost reached his eyes. I see. That is unfortunate. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, holding it out to her. In case you feel better later. Marina took it because refusing seemed more dangerous than accepting. The card was heavy, expensive stock, with just a name and a phone number embossed in silver. Enjoy your evening, ladies. Preston. He nodded to each of them in turn, and then he was gone, moving through the crowd like a shark through dark water. The moment he was out of earshot, Preston grabbed Marina's arm hard enough to hurt. What the hell was that? Do you have any idea who that man is? Let go of me. Marina yanked her arm away, fighting the panic that always rose when a man grabbed her unexpectedly. You just insulted Alexei Volkov, Preston continued, his voice low and furious. Do you understand what that means? For me? For Kara? Preston, she didn't mean, Kara started. She embarrassed us, in front of the most important man in this room. Preston's hand shot out again, this time reaching for Marina's scarf. What is your problem tonight? You've been touching that thing constantly. You can barely make eye contact with anyone. His fingers caught the silk, tugging it downward, and Marina's hands flew up to stop him, but she was too slow, too shocked, and the scarf slipped just enough to reveal the upper edge of what lay beneath. Preston froze. Kara gasped. Marina's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the scarf as she yanked it back into place, her face burning with humiliation. She could feel eyes on them now, people beginning to notice the commotion. Oh my God, Kara whispered. Marina, what? I'm leaving. Marina's voice came out strangled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She turned and walked as quickly as she could without running, weaving through the clusters of guests, keeping her head down, her hand pressed against the scarf to keep it in place. She could hear Kara calling after her, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. The ballroom doors seemed miles away. Her vision was blurring with tears she refused to let fall, and she wasn't watching where she was going carefully enough because suddenly she collided with something solid and unyielding. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. She looked up through her unshed tears into pale gray eyes. Leaving so soon? Alexei Volkov asked softly. I thought you weren't feeling well, but now you look positively distressed. What happened? Nothing. Please, I just need to go. She tried to pull away, but his hands tightened slightly. You're shaking. His voice had lost its smooth, dangerous edge. Now it was quiet, almost gentle, and somehow that made everything worse. Who hurt you? No one. I'm fine. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. His eyes dropped to where her hand clutched the scarf, and something dangerous flickered across his face. Marina. He said her name like a command, and against her will she met his eyes again. Come with me. I don't even know you. No, but I'm not the one who made you afraid. He released one of her shoulders, but kept his hand on the other, beginning to guide her through the crowd. And right now, you need to not be in this ballroom where everyone is staring. He was right. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes, the whispers starting to spread like ripples in a pond. So she let him lead her through a side door she hadn't noticed before, down a corridor lined with oil paintings, and into a small private lounge with leather furniture and a single large window overlooking the city. The door clicked shut behind them, and suddenly the muffled noise of the party disappeared, leaving only silence and the pounding of Marina's heart. Alexei moved to a sidebar and poured amber liquid into a crystal glass. He walked back to her and held it out. Drink, It will help. It's just brandy. Good brandy, which you clearly need. When she still hesitated, he added, I promise you, if I wanted to hurt you, there are far more efficient methods than drugging your drink in a private room. The logic was twisted, but somehow it worked. Marina took the glass and downed half of it in one gulp, coughing at the burn. Slower, he said, with what might have been amusement. She sank onto one of the leather sofas, still clutching the glass in one hand and her scarf with the other. Alexei sat in the chair across from her, his posture relaxed, but his eyes remained sharp, watchful. Tell me what happened, he said. Why do you care? Humor me. Marina let out a shaky laugh. I can't. You're a stranger. A dangerous one, if half the rumors are true. All of the rumors are true, he said it matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. But I am not dangerous to women who are already afraid. I'm dangerous to men who make them that way. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marina took another sip of brandy, smaller this time, letting the warmth spread through her chest. Preston pulled at my scarf, she finally said. He didn't mean to reveal anything. He was just angry with me for being rude to you. But it slipped, and they saw. Her voice cracked. They saw. Saw what, Marina? She shook her head, unable to say it out loud. Alexei leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze intent on her face. The scarf is hiding something. Something you don't want people to see. It wasn't a question. And based on your reaction, based on the fear I saw in your eyes when that idiot Preston grabbed you, I'm guessing it's not a tattoo you regret, or a birthmark you're self-conscious about. Marina's hand went to the scarf again, that unconscious protective gesture she couldn't seem to break. Someone hurt you, Alexei continued, his voice dropping lower. Recently, given how fresh your fear is. Someone put marks on you that you're ashamed of, though God knows you shouldn't be ashamed. The shame belongs to whoever did that to you. Please stop. Did you leave him? The question was so direct, so unexpectedly understanding that Marina's careful control shattered. A sob broke free, then another, and suddenly she was crying in earnest, covering her face with one hand, while the other maintained its death grip on the glass of brandy. She felt the sofa dip as Alexei sat beside her. She expected him to touch her, to offer some awkward pat on the shoulder, or, worse, to pull her into an embrace she didn't want. But he simply sat there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence, but not touching, giving her space to fall apart. I'm sorry, she gasped when she could speak again. God, I'm such a mess. You don't need to see this. I've seen much worse, I assure you. He produced a handkerchief from his pocket, an actual cloth handkerchief like something from another era, and held it out to her. She took it, dabbing at her eyes, probably destroying what was left of her makeup. 3 weeks ago, I left him 3 weeks ago. Good. I went to stay with my parents in Rhode Island. They wanted me to file a police report, but I couldn't. I couldn't face going through all of that, having to prove what happened, having pictures taken of my... She stopped, swallowing hard. So I came back to Connecticut last week, went back to work, tried to pretend everything was normal. But your sister needed you tonight. Kara doesn't know. None of them know except my parents. I told everyone we just broke up, that it was mutual, that I needed space. Marina let out a bitter laugh. And then tonight, Preston pulled my scarf and suddenly they all know that I'm a victim, that I'm damaged, that I let someone... Stop! The single word cut through her spiral like a blade. You didn't let anything happen. Someone chose to hurt you. That was his choice, his failing, his evil. Not yours. Marina looked at him through tear-blurred eyes. You don't understand. Don't I? Alexei's jaw tightened. My mother wore scarves too. Long sleeves in summer. Makeup that didn't quite cover the bruises. I was 8 years old when I finally understood why. He paused, and something ancient and murderous flickered in his gray eyes. I was 15 when I made sure he never hit her again. The implication was clear, and Marina should have been horrified. Instead, she felt a strange, dark satisfaction. "Where is he now?" she asked. "Your father?" "Dead. 23 years ago." Alexei's smile was sharp enough to cut. "A tragic accident with his car brakes. These things happen." They sat in silence for a moment, an understanding passing between them that transcended the strangeness of the situation. "What was his name?" Alexei asked quietly. "The man who hurt you." "Richard. Richard Morrison." "And where is Richard Morrison now?" Marina heard the danger in that simple question and shook her head. "I don't want you to do anything. I just want to forget it ever happened." "That's not how trauma works, Marina. You can't forget. You can only decide what power it has over you." He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and gently lifted her chin so she had to meet his eyes. "And right now, Richard Morrison has power over you. You're hiding, wearing scarves in a warm ballroom, jumping when men touch you, unable to look people in the eye. Is that how you want to live?" "No," she whispered. "But what choice do I have?" "Many choices. The question is which one will let you sleep at night." Before Marina could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Alexei's expression shifted instantly, becoming cold and distant again as he rose and crossed to answer it. A man in a dark suit leaned in and murmured something Marina couldn't hear. Alexei nodded once, then closed the door and turned back to her. "Your sister and her fiancé are looking for you, making quite a scene, apparently." His tone was dry. "Preston is telling anyone who will listen that you've been unstable lately, that you've been through a difficult breakup, trying to explain away what people saw." Fresh humiliation burned through Marina's chest. "He's making excuses for me." "He's protecting his own reputation. There's a difference." Alexei walked back to her and held out his hand. "Come, I'll take you home." "You don't have to. I'm not offering out of obligation. I want to make sure you get home safely." When she still hesitated, he added, "Besides, if you try to leave through the front, you'll have to face all of them. I know another exit." Marina took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. The brandy had steadied her nerves somewhat, but she still felt fragile, like glass that had cracked, but not yet shattered completely. Alexei led her through a maze of back corridors, past service areas where catering staff barely glanced at them, and finally out a side entrance into the cool night air. A black car was waiting, sleek and expensive, with a driver who materialized from the shadows. "My building is in—" "I know where you live," Alexei said, then caught her expression. "Preston's been trying to get into business with me for months. Background checks on associates and their families are standard practice." He opened the car door for her, and Marina slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her car. Alexei followed, settling beside her as the driver pulled smoothly into traffic. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows. Marina felt exhausted suddenly, drained by the emotional roller coaster of the evening. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for getting me out of there, for listening. You didn't have to do any of that. Perhaps I wanted to." She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not pity, thankfully. Something more complex, more intense. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me." "No, but I'd like to." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I recognize strength when I see it, Marina. What you did tonight, standing up to Preston. Refusing my invitation even though you knew it might cause problems. Walking away from that ballroom with your head high despite your fear. That takes courage. Most people in that room have never had to find that kind of courage. They've never had to survive something that tried to break them. I don't feel very strong. Strength isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it." His hand moved, just slightly, as if he wanted to reach for hers but stopped himself. "When you're ready, not tonight, Perhaps not for a while. I'd like to take you to dinner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere you can wear whatever you want, scarf or no scarf, and no one will stare. Marina's breath caught. I'm not ready for dating. I don't know if I'll ever. This isn't about dating. This is about two people who understand that the world can be cruel having a conversation over good food. He tilted his head slightly. Unless you'd prefer I leave you alone entirely. I can do that too. The car pulled up in front of her building, a modest apartment complex in a neighborhood that was safe, but not fancy. The driver got out to open her door, but Marina didn't move yet. I'll think about it, she finally said. Alexei smiled, and this time, it was genuine. That's all I ask. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another business card, or maybe the same one she'd left behind at the party. When you're ready, or if you need anything at all, any time, day or night. Marina took the card, folding it carefully and tucking it into her purse. Then she stepped out of the car, and the cool night air washed over her like a blessing. She was halfway to her building's entrance when Alexei's voice stopped her. Marina. She turned back. He was leaning out of the car window, his expression serious. Richard Morrison. Is he the kind of man who accepts endings? Ice slid down her spine. I don't know. He's called a few times, left messages. I've blocked him, but men like that often don't take no for an answer. Alexei's jaw tightened. If he contacts you again, call me immediately. Don't engage with him. Don't try to handle it yourself. Just call. Why would you? Because I meant what I said. About men who hurt women. About what they deserve. His eyes held hers across the distance. And because I keep my word when I promise to keep someone safe. The car pulled away before Marina could respond, leaving her standing on the sidewalk with a business card in her purse and a strange, unexpected warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the brandy. She touched the scarf at her throat and, for the first time in 3 weeks, wondered what it might feel like to take it off. The next morning, Marina woke to 17 missed calls from Kara and a text message that simply read, "We need to talk. Now." Marina made coffee first because she refused to face her sister's drama without caffeine. Then she sat on her small balcony, watching the city wake up, and finally called back. "Where have you been?" Kara's voice was shrill with panic. "I've been calling all night." "Sleeping. I turned my phone off." Marina took a sip of coffee. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong? Marina, you disappeared with Alexei Volkov. Preston is losing his mind. He thinks you've ruined everything." "I didn't disappear with him. He gave me a ride home because I was upset." Marina's hand went to her throat, finding bare skin. She'd taken the scarf off before bed and hadn't put a new one on yet. It felt strange, vulnerable, but also oddly liberating. "And Preston should be more concerned about the fact that he grabbed me in public and upset me enough that I left." "That's not how he sees it." Kara's voice dropped. "Marina, what happened to your neck? Those marks?" "Richard happened. Richard and his temper and his hands and his need to control everything about me." The words came out sharper than Marina intended. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want anyone to know that I'd stayed with him as long as I did. Because I knew people would ask questions I couldn't answer, like why I didn't leave sooner or why I didn't fight back harder." Marina's voice cracked. "Because I knew Preston would be worried about how it looked, not about whether I was okay. That's not fair. Isn't it? Last night he was more upset about me being rude to Volkov than about the fact that I clearly had bruises around my neck." Kara didn't argue, which was answer enough. "I love you," Marina continued, softer now. "You're my sister, and I'd do anything for you, but I can't pretend to be okay when I'm not. I can't wear a mask and smile at dangerous men and act like my world hasn't been turned upside down. I'm doing my best, but my best right now is pretty broken. I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pressured you to come last night." Kara paused. "What was he like?" "Volkov?" Marina thought about pale gray eyes and a handkerchief offered without expectation. About a man who understood that survival was its own kind of strength. Different than I expected, she said finally. He was kind, in a strange way. Preston says he's dangerous, that he's connected to all sorts of illegal things. I don't doubt it, but he was kind to me when I needed it, and that counts for something. After she hung up with Kara, Marina spent the day trying to grade papers and failing miserably. Her mind kept drifting back to the previous evening, to Alexei's words about strength and courage and choosing what power to give her trauma. By late afternoon, she'd made a decision. She pulled out Alexei's business card and stared at the number for a long moment. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she typed out a text message. "This is Marina. Thank you again for last night. If the dinner offer still stands, I'd like to accept. Not tonight, but maybe next week. Somewhere quiet, like you said." She hit send before she could delete it, and immediately regretted every word. What was she doing? She barely knew this man. He was dangerous, probably criminal, completely outside her safe, normal world. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Next Saturday at 7. I'll pick you up. And Marina, I'm glad you reached out." Marina smiled despite herself and typed back, "No scarves required?" The response came quickly. "Only if you want to. Everything with me is your choice. Always." The week that followed was surreal. Marina went back to teaching her middle school art classes, helping 12-year-olds understand color theory and perspective while her own life felt increasingly out of focus. She avoided Kara's calls and Preston's angry voicemails. She tried not to think about the dinner on Saturday and failed completely. On Thursday evening, as she was leaving school, she saw Richard leaning against her car. Her body reacted before her mind caught up. Heart racing, breath shallow, hands shaking so badly she dropped her keys. Richard smiled when he saw her reaction. That same charming smile that had first attracted her 2 years ago, before she'd learned what lay beneath it. "Hey, Marina, we need to talk." "No, we don't." She was proud that her voice only shook a little. "You need to leave. I've been clear about that." "You blocked my number. How is that clear communication?" He pushed off from the car and took a step toward her. "We had a fight, baby. Couples fight. That doesn't mean we throw away 2 years together." "You put your hands around my throat, Richard. That's not a fight." His expression hardened. "You were being hysterical. I was trying to calm you down." Marina's stomach churned with a sick mixture of fear and fury. This was what he did. Twisted everything until up was down, and her pain was somehow her fault. "Stay away from me." She started backing toward the school entrance, where there were still a few teachers in the building. "I mean it, Richard. If you contact me again, I'll file a police report." "With what evidence? You think anyone will believe you when you waited 3 weeks? When you never reported it?" He kept pace with her, not touching, but close enough to loom. "I'll tell them you're vindictive because I broke up with you. Your word against mine, Marina. Who do you think they'll believe?" She reached the school doors, her hand on the handle, and found her courage. "Get help, Richard. Please. Before you hurt someone else the way you hurt me." She slipped inside before he could respond, her whole body trembling. Through the glass doors, she watched him stand there for a long moment, his face twisted with anger. Then he turned and walked to his car, getting in and driving away. Marina made it to the bathroom before she threw up. She called Alexei from her classroom after everyone else had gone home, her hands still shaking as she held the phone. "He showed up at my school." Her voice came out small, fragile. "Richard. He was waiting by my car. He said—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Where are you now?" Alexei's voice was deadly calm. "Still at the school. I'm afraid to go to my car." "Give me the address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave the building until I arrive." He was there in 15. Marina watched from the window as the sleek black car pulled into the parking lot. Alexei got out, and he wasn't alone. 2 other men emerged from the car, both dressed in dark suits, both moving with the kind of fluid awareness that spoke of violence held on a tight leash. Alexei saw her through the window and raised one hand, a small gesture that somehow made her feel safer. She grabbed her bag and headed outside. "He's gone," she said as she approached. "He left almost an hour ago." "His license plate number. Do you have it?" Yes. I took a picture, just in case." She pulled out her phone with trembling hands and showed him. One of Alexei's men took the phone, tapping something into his own device. He nodded to Alexei, who turned his full attention back to Marina. "You're not staying at your apartment tonight." "What? No, I can't just—" "Marina." He stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Richard knows where you live. He knows where you work. He knows your routines. And based on what you just told me, he's not going to stop. So you have two choices. You can go to your parents in Rhode Island, or you can stay in one of my properties where I can guarantee your safety. I have school tomorrow. I have students who will understand if you need a few days. Call in sick, or don't, and I'll have someone drive you there and back. But you're not going home alone tonight." Marina wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But her hands were still shaking, and the memory of Richard's face, his threat about her word against his, made her feel sick all over again. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." The apartment Alexei took her to was in a high-rise in downtown Manhattan, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. There was a doorman, security cameras, and, she noticed, 2 of Alexei's men posted discreetly in the lobby. "This is too much," she protested as he showed her into the space. "I can't afford—" "You're not paying for it. Consider it a favor." "Favors come with debts." Alexei turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense. "The only debt you owe me is honesty. If you feel unsafe, tell me. If Richard contacts you again, tell me. If you change your mind about any of this and want to leave, tell me. That's all I ask." Marina set her bag down on the pristine white couch and looked around the apartment that was nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. "Why are you doing this, really?" "Because I can. Because you need help and I have resources." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. "And because I know what it's like to feel powerless. To watch someone you care about suffer and not be able to stop it. I couldn't protect my mother, but I can help you." The raw honesty in his voice made Marina's throat tight. She walked to the window and stared out at the glittering cityscape, wrapping her arms around herself. "I feel like I'm losing control of my life," she said quietly. 3 weeks ago I thought leaving Richard would be the hard part, that once I was out, I'd be free. But I'm not free. I'm just scared in a different location." She heard him move closer, felt his presence behind her like warmth from a fire. Fear is temporary. It feels permanent when you're in it. But it's not. You will heal, Marina. You will feel safe again. You will stop jumping at shadows. His reflection appeared in the window beside hers. But healing takes time, and in that time, you need to be protected. Let me do that for you. Marina turned to face him, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. Standing this close, she could see flecks of blue in the gray, like ice with hidden depths. What happens when this is over? When I don't need protection anymore? A slow smile curved his lips. Then we'll have that dinner I promised you, and maybe many more after that, if you'll let me. I'm broken, Alexei. I'm not ready for anything like that. I'm not asking for anything except your company. I find you fascinating, Marina. Your strength, your kindness, despite what you've been through. The way you stood up for yourself even when you were terrified. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so gentle it made her want to cry. I'll wait as long as it takes. And if you decide you never want more than friendship, I'll accept that too. You're a very patient man for someone with such a dangerous reputation. Only when something is worth waiting for. Marina stayed in the apartment for 3 days. She called in sick to school, ignored messages from everyone except her parents and Alexei, and tried to figure out what to do next. Alexei visited every evening, bringing food and conversation, and a sense of safety she hadn't felt in months. On the 3rd night, he arrived with news. "Richard Morrison has been arrested," he said without preamble, setting down a bag of Thai takeout on the kitchen counter. Marina's heart stuttered. "What? For what?" "Assault. It seems another woman came forward with allegations very similar to yours. A woman he dated before you." "The police are investigating." Alexei's expression was carefully neutral. "They may want to speak with you as well, to see if you'll add your statement to the case." Marina sank onto one of the bar stools, her mind reeling. Another woman. There was someone before me. Likely more than one. Men like Richard rarely start their violence out of nowhere. They practice on others first, refining their control tactics. "How do you know all this?" "I have friends in many places. Some of them owe me favors." He met her eyes steadily. "Richard Morrison is going to face consequences for what he's done. Whether you add your voice to the case or not is entirely your choice. But you should know that you have support if you decide to speak up." Marina thought about the woman who'd been brave enough to come forward first. Thought about other women who might come after if Richard wasn't stopped. Thought about the 12-year-old girls in her art classes, and what she'd want them to do if they ever found themselves in her situation. "I'll testify," she said. "I'll tell them everything." Alexei nodded, something like pride flickering in his expression. "I thought you might. I've already arranged for a lawyer to represent you through the process. One of the best prosecutors in the city. She's expecting your call. You knew I'd say yes. I hoped you would. There's a difference." They ate Thai food and talked about everything except Richard, Alexei's work shipping legitimate goods around the world, Marina's favorite students and their artistic potential, their childhoods, their dreams. It was the most normal evening Marina had spent in months, and yet nothing about it was normal because she was eating pad thai with a man who probably had people killed, and she was starting to feel things she had no right to feel. When he got up to leave around midnight, Marina walked him to the door and found herself not wanting him to go. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. The apartment, the lawyer, the safety. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "Don't you think you could ever repay me?" Alexei cupped her cheek with one hand, his thumb brushing along her jaw. "This isn't a transaction, Marina. This is me choosing to help someone I care about. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and kind and stronger than you think. I know you make terrible jokes when you're nervous, and that you're passionate about teaching art to kids who will probably never appreciate it." His smile was soft, genuine. "And I know that I want to keep knowing you for as long as you'll let me." Marina's breath caught. Standing there in the doorway with his hand on her face and his eyes full of something that looked dangerously like tenderness, she made a choice. She reached up and slowly, deliberately, unwound the scarf from her neck. It had become habit again over the past few days, armor against the world. But standing here with Alexei, she didn't want armor. The marks were fading now, yellow-green bruises instead of the angry purple they'd been 3 weeks ago. But they were still visible, still obvious, still shameful in her eyes. Alexei's jaw tightened as he looked at them, a muscle jumping in his cheek. His hand moved from her face to her throat, fingers so gentle they barely touched as he traced the outline of the bruises. "Beautiful," he murmured. "Even with these marks of survival, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. They're ugly. I'm ugly. No." His eyes snapped up to hers, fierce and intense. "These are proof that you survived, that you're still here, still fighting, still alive despite someone trying to break you. There is nothing ugly about survival, Marina. Nothing." And then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her throat, over the worst of the bruises, so gently it felt like benediction. Marina's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in weeks, They weren't tears of shame or fear. "I'm going to kiss you now," Alexei said softly, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "And you can say no, and I'll walk out that door and nothing will change between us. But if you say yes, you need to understand something. I don't do halfway. If I start this, if you let me in, I'm going to be the kind of man who shows up, who protects what's his, who doesn't let go easily." Marina's heart was hammering against her ribs. That sounds terrifying. It should. I'm not an easy man, Marina. I'm possessive and overprotective, and I've done things that would horrify you if you knew all the details. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. But I would never, ever hurt you. Not like he did. Not in any way. She should say no. She should push him away and maintain her distance and focus on healing alone. She should not be standing here thinking about kissing a man who was essentially a criminal, no matter how kind he'd been to her. But Marina was so tired of should. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want you to kiss me." He smiled, and this time it was fierce and possessive and full of promise. Then his mouth was on hers, and Marina forgot every reason this was a bad idea. He kissed like he did everything else, with absolute focus and intensity, as if nothing existed in the world except her. His hand stayed gentle on her throat, over the bruises, claiming them as part of her instead of marks of shame. His other hand slid into her hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. Marina had been kissed before, had been with Richard for 2 years after all. But this was different. This felt like drowning and breathing at the same time. Like falling and being caught. Like every romance novel she'd secretly read and thought was unrealistic. When Alexei finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. Marina's fingers were clutched in his suit jacket, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "Saturday," he said, his voice rough. "Dinner. A real date where I court you properly instead of kissing you in doorways like a teenager. I think I like doorway kissing. You'll like what comes after even more." He kissed her again, brief and hard. "But we're doing this right. You deserve to be courted, Marina. To be treated like something precious. So I'm going to leave now before I forget that." He did leave, though it took another 5 minutes and several more kisses. Marina closed the door behind him and leaned against it, touching her lips and smiling for the first time in what felt like years. Saturday arrived with spring rain, and Marina's nerves stretched taut. She'd met with the prosecutor twice during the week, giving her statement about Richard's violence. It had been brutal, reliving those moments, but the lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, had been kind and professional, promising that Marina's testimony would help build a strong case. Now Marina stood in front of her closet in the apartment Alexei had provided, trying to decide what to wear for a date with a dangerous man she was falling for far too quickly. She chose a simple dress in deep blue, with a scoop neck that left her throat exposed. No scarf. The bruises were nearly gone now anyway, just faint shadows that could be mistaken for makeup or lighting. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back, someone stronger than the person who'd hidden in silk scarves 3 weeks ago. Alexei arrived exactly at 7, dressed in a dark gray suit that made his eyes look like molten silver. He looked at her for a long moment, taking in the dress and the exposed throat and the careful makeup, and smiled. "Perfect," he said simply, offering his arm. "You look perfect." He took her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place that didn't advertise and probably required reservations months in advance. But the owner greeted Alexei like an old friend, leading them to a private corner table with candles and fresh flowers. "Do you own this restaurant too?" Marina asked as they sat down. "I helped the owner secure his business loan when the banks wouldn't take a chance on him. He's been grateful ever since." Alexei shrugged. Sometimes the best investments are the ones that pay back in loyalty rather than money. They ordered wine and pasta and talked about everything and nothing. Marina found herself laughing at Alexei's dry observations about the other diners, relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. He asked about her students, her art, her dreams beyond teaching. She asked about his childhood in Russia, his move to America, how he'd built his empire from nothing. Most people are afraid to ask me about my work, he noted, twirling pasta on his fork. They pretend they don't know what I do. I'm not most people, and I figure if I'm going to consider dating a man with a dangerous reputation, I should at least know what I'm getting into. Smart. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. All right, ask me anything. I'll answer honestly, though you may not like all the answers. Have you ever killed anyone? His expression didn't change. Yes. Recently? Not in several years. I've moved away from the hands-on aspects of my business. I employ people for that now. Marina took a sip of wine, processing this. Do you feel guilty about it? No. The men I've killed were not good men. They hurt people, destroyed lives, dealt in things that should not exist in a civilized world. His eyes met hers steadily. I'm not claiming to be a hero, Marina. I'm not. But I don't lose sleep over removing dangerous men from the world. And Richard? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Did you have something to do with that woman coming forward? Alexei's smile was sharp. I may have made certain phone calls that ensured the investigation was fast-tracked and thorough. I may have provided resources that helped locate other victims. But the woman who came forward did so of her own free will, with her own courage. I simply made sure the system didn't fail her the way it fails so many women. Thank you, Marina said softly, for caring enough to do that. I care about you. Helping ensure your abuser faces justice is the least I can do. After dinner, they walked through the rain-slicked streets, Marina's hand tucked into the crook of Alexei's arm. The city felt different like this. Softer, more romantic, full of possibility instead of threat. I have something for you, Alexei said as they approached his car. He pulled out a small jewelry box from his pocket, offering it to her. Marina's heart skipped. Alexei, I can't. Just open it. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a single pendant, a small bird taking flight, its wings spread wide. I thought, Alexei said quietly, that you might want something new to wear. Something that represents where you're going instead of where you've been. Marina's eyes filled with tears. She lifted the necklace from the box, watching it catch the streetlight. It's beautiful. May I? She handed it to him and turned around, lifting her hair. His fingers were warm against her neck as he fastened the clasp, and she shivered at the intimacy of the gesture. When she turned back, his hand lingered on her throat, over the place where the bruises used to be. You're free now, he said. Richard is in custody. The charges are serious enough that his bail was denied. You can go back to your apartment, back to your normal life. I know. Marina covered his hand with hers, keeping it pressed against her throat. But what if I don't want to go back to normal? What if I want this? Whatever this is between us. Then I'm yours for as long as you'll have me. He pulled her closer, his other arm wrapping around her waist. But you need to be sure, Marina. I'm not a good man in most ways that count. Being with me means accepting that. Means sometimes looking the other way, sometimes not asking questions when I disappear for a few days. Means understanding that there are parts of my life I can't share, not even with you. I'm not naive, Alexei. I know what you are. Marina reached up and cupped his face in both hands. But I also know that you've been kinder to me than any good man ever was. You've made me feel safe and valued and strong when I thought I'd never feel those things again. So yes, I'm sure. I want this. I want you. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, right there on the rain-soaked street with the city moving around them. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were blazing with something fierce and possessive. Mine, he said, and it sounded like a vow. From this moment on, you're mine, and I'm yours. Say it. Yours, Marina whispered. I'm yours. 6 months later, Marina stood in front of a courtroom, her hand steady as she gave her testimony about the night Richard had wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed until she saw spots. about the fear and the shame and the careful hiding afterward. About the strength it had taken to leave and the terror of wondering if he'd come back. Alexei sat in the gallery, exactly where she could see him, his presence a steady anchor. When she faltered, she looked at him and found the courage to continue. Richard was convicted on multiple counts. 3 other women had come forward, adding their stories to Marina's. The judge gave him 8 years, and when the verdict was read, Marina felt something inside her finally release. A knot of fear and shame she'd been carrying for so long, she'd forgotten it was there. Outside the courthouse, Alexei pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, while she cried tears of relief and exhaustion and something that felt like joy. "It's over," she said against his chest. "It's really over." "It's over," he agreed. "And now we begin." They were married a year later in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Kara was her maid of honor, finally understanding why Marina had fallen for the dangerous man with the gentle hands. Marina's parents were wary but accepting, recognizing that their daughter was happier than they'd ever seen her. On their wedding night, as Marina stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom removing her jewelry, Alexei came up behind her and carefully unfastened the clasp of her necklace, the bird in flight he'd given her that first night. "Do you know why I chose this design?" he asked, holding the pendant up to catch the light. "Because I was finally free? Because you were always meant to fly. You just needed to remember how." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You saved yourself, Marina. Long before I came along. I just made sure nothing could drag you down again." Marina reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him with all the love and gratitude and fierce joy that filled her heart. "We saved each other," she whispered against his lips. "And that's worth everything." He kissed her again, and in that moment Marina knew that she had found something she'd thought was only in stories. A love that healed instead of hurt, a partner who made her stronger instead of smaller, a future bright with promise instead of shadowed with fear. She had flown, and she had found someone who would fly beside her, and she would never, ever need to hide behind a scarf again.